You know how they say curiosity killed the cat? Well, my curiosity almost killed me. It started innocently enough, a late-night dive into the depths of the internet, where I stumbled upon a forum dedicated to dark web oddities. I've always been a sucker for the supernatural, the unexplained mysteries that give life a bit of spice. But this time, my fascination led me to something far darker than I'd ever encountered. The post that caught my eye was simple, almost too plain, given the forum's usual flair for the dramatic. Cursed Book of Shadows for sale, serious buyers only. The user claimed it was an ancient tome bound in what looked like human skin, with pages that could bring forth or bind away demonic entities. The price was steep, but the thrill of owning such a forbidden artifact was too tempting to resist. 3 days later, a nondescript package arrived at my doorstep. No return address, just layers of black, nondescript wrapping that seemed to swallow the light around it. Inside was the book, its cover a grotesque patchwork of leathery textures that made my stomach churn. I should have realized then that some things are better left unfound. The first few pages were written in a script I didn't recognize, accompanied by disturbing, intricate drawings of ritualistic ceremonies and demonic entities so vivid they seemed to move when viewed from the corner of your eye. As I flipped through the pages, an inexplicable chill settled over my room, and the air grew thick as if it were charged with static. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I began to read aloud. The words twisted my tongue, a foreign dialect that felt as though it was reshaping my very thoughts. That's when the whispers started, soft, insidious, curling around my consciousness like smoke. They urged me to try one of the rituals described in the book, a sealing ritual meant to bind any free-roaming spirits nearby. The ingredients were simple, things I had around the house: salt, ash, and, a more chilling requirement, a drop of my own blood. The whispers grew louder, drowning out the rational part of my mind that screamed to stop. I drew a circle with the salt and ash, placed the book in the center, and with shaking hands let a drop of blood fall onto its open page. The air snapped like a charged circuit. The room spun, and for a moment I could see them, shadows flitting at the edge of my vision, their forms grotesque and shifting. The circle glowed with a faint, otherworldly light, and the shadows recoiled as if burned. I continued the chant, my voice no longer my own, until with a deafening silence, everything stopped. I was alone, or so I thought. The book remained in the circle, seemingly inert, but the atmosphere had shifted. There was a heaviness, a lingering malevolence that draped over every corner of my home. The whispers had ceased, but their absence was even more terrifying. I had sealed something inside with me, something ancient and angry. That night, I didn't sleep. The shadows seemed darker, stretching towards me with intangible fingers. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind against the windows felt like a warning. I had unleashed something by reading from that book, something that had no intention of being bound by ancient rituals. As dawn broke, the true horror of my situation became clear. My reflection in the mirror was gaunt, eyes hollow as if I hadn't slept in days. But it was the faint, almost imperceptible mark on my forearm that confirmed my worst fears, a symbol from the book, etched into my skin as though branded. Whatever I had called forth last night was now a part of me, and I was part of it. And that was just the beginning. Each subsequent page seemed to draw me in deeper, revealing horrors not meant for the human mind, but I couldn't stop. I had to know if there was a way to reverse what I'd done, to save myself from the creeping dread that consumed my every waking moment. I didn't know it then, but my search for salvation was only leading me further into darkness. The book had more secrets to share, each more terrifying than the last, and I was its chosen confessor. As days blurred into restless nights, the effects of the ritual and the cursed book intensified. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It had transformed into a prison with walls that whispered secrets in the dead of night. Every mirror reflected a version of me I barely recognized, haggard, pale, with eyes haunted by what they had seen. Driven by a desperate need to understand the forces I had unwittingly unleashed, I delved deeper into the book. Its pages seemed endless, each turn revealing new horrors that tested the limits of my sanity. The illustrations became more grotesque, depicting rituals and creatures so malevolent that even glancing at them left a residue of dread that clung to me like a second skin. I was determined to find a reversal ritual, something that could undo the darkness that seeped deeper into my life with each passing moment. But as I searched, the book revealed its true nature. It wasn't just a collection of spells and incantations. It was a sentient entity, aware of my intentions and manipulating my actions. One night, while poring over a particularly disturbing chapter that detailed a summoning gone awry, the air around me grew oppressively cold. My breath misted in the air, and the scant light from my lamp flickered as if struggling to maintain its grip against an encroaching darkness. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. Panicked, I slammed the book shut, but the sound continued, a sinister reminder that I was not alone. The room felt smaller, the walls inching closer, suffused with a malevolent presence that mocked my fear. In a moment of sheer terror, I realized that the book was not merely a passive vessel for ancient knowledge, it was a trap, a gateway that had lured me into its web. The growls gave way to a cacophony of voices, each one a dissonant echo of the last. They didn't speak in any language known to man, but in a symphony of screams and cries that shattered any hope of peace. I covered my ears, but the voices penetrated deeper, an auditory assault that seemed to bypass the physical realm and resonate directly with my soul. Sleep became an elusive, treacherous thing. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were vivid and violent. Nightmarish visions of ritual sacrifices and demonic entities feasting on the helpless. I would wake drenched in sweat, the lingering images so visceral that I began to dread closing my eyes. But it was the shadows that truly tormented me. They moved now, independent of any light source, slinking along the walls and floor with purpose. At times, I caught glimpses of figures within them, eyes glinting with malevolence and amusement. They watched me, always just out of clear sight, their presence a constant pressure at the back of my mind. Desperation led me to reckless decisions. I tried to destroy the book, burn it, tear it, throw it into the river, but it always returned, unscathed and mocking. Each attempt left me weaker, more drained, as if the book fed on my despair. The isolation was complete. I couldn't bring myself to involve others, to expose them to the horror that now lived at the edges of my existence. My phone calls went unanswered, my messages unreturned. I was alone, utterly alone with the book and its legion of shadows. As the line between reality and the nightmarish visions blurred, I found myself slipping further into madness. The book was no longer just a physical object, but a presence that invaded every corner of my life, dictating my every move with its dark whims. In my weakest moments, I wondered if the only escape was to give in completely, to embrace the darkness that called to me from the blood-stained pages. But a faint spark of resolve flickered within me, a resolve to fight, to reclaim my life from the abyss that beckoned with a siren's call. And so, armed with a fading glimmer of hope, I turned the page, searching for an answer, a way to sever the ties that bound me to the book's dark heart. Little did I know the worst was yet to come. As the days turned into weeks, my reality had become a twisted labyrinth of dark corridors and whispered threats. The more I engaged with the book, the more it seemed to feed on my fear, growing stronger, its influence more invasive. Despite the hellish ordeal, a part of me clung desperately to the hope of finding a solution within its cursed pages. That hope was both my salvation and my curse. It was during one particularly bleak night that I stumbled upon a chapter that hadn't been there before, or perhaps it had, and I was only now ready to see it. This section was ominously titled The Binding of Shadows, and it promised a method to contain the darkness that had spilled into my life. The ritual required items that were not just rare but dangerous to procure. I needed the bone of a hanged man, the heart of a crow, and the ash of a tree struck by lightning. Collecting these items would force me to confront the physical manifestations of the horrors I'd been living through. Each acquisition was a nightmare unto itself. The bone had to be taken from the local cemetery, a place that had become a haven for the shadows that haunted me. The night I chose for this task was moonless, the darkness almost palpable. As I dug into the grave, the soft thuds of my shovel seemed to echo into the depths of the earth, answered by the faint, mocking laughter of the unseen. Retrieving the crow's heart was no less harrowing. The crows knew what I was after. They gathered, watching me with their sharp, intelligent eyes, cawing menacingly as if communicating with the shadows that flitted around the edges of my vision. When I finally captured one, its heart beating wildly against my palm, it felt like an omen, a token of the darkness that I was battling to overcome. The final item, the ash, sent me into the heart of a forest that locals spoke of only in hushed tones. Lightning had scarred its center, striking a once majestic oak that now stood as a charred sentinel. Gathering the ash, I felt the eyes of the forest upon me, the weight of 1,000 malevolent glances that seemed to push me further towards a brink I no longer fully understood. With all 3 items in my possession, I prepared for the ritual. The book's instructions were clear, but every step was a battle against the creeping dread that threatened to overwhelm me. I set up in my basement, the walls already scrawled with protective symbols I'd etched during sleepless nights. The circle was drawn with precision, each item placed according to the arcane geometry described in the book. As I began the incantation, the air thickened, the darkness coalescing into forms too horrific to fully comprehend. They pressed against the barrier of the circle, their forms a grotesque tapestry of all my fears made manifest. The voices returned, louder than ever, a cacophonous symphony that sought to drown out my own voice. I continued, my voice steady with a resolve forged from the very depths of my terror. When the ritual reached its climax, the basement erupted in an eldritch light that burned away the shadows, but the relief was short-lived. The shadows, though bound, were not gone. They writhed within their confines, a mass of darkness seething with malice at the edge of the circle. Their binding was a temporary solution, a cage for a menace that yearned to break free. Exhausted, I collapsed, the weight of my endeavors pulling me into a restless sleep. I dreamt of dark seas and darker skies, of voices that promised endless torment. I woke to a house shrouded in silence, the kind of silence that screams. The book lay open, as if waiting, its pages fluttering as though breathing. Part 3 had brought me no closer to salvation, only deeper into the darkness. As I braced myself for the challenges ahead, I knew that the true test of my will was yet to come. The shadows were contained, but not defeated, and the book held more secrets I was yet to uncover. My fight was far from over, and the darkness was patient, ever waiting for a slip, a sign of weakness to exploit. The ritual's aftermath left an eerie stillness in my home that was far from comforting. The shadows, though bound, pulsed with a malevolent energy from the confines of their prison, a visual reminder of the darkness that loomed just beyond my protective barriers. My every movement felt observed, every whisper of wind a potential harbinger of renewed horror. The book, ever my tormentor, seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, its pages occasionally fluttering as if in anticipation of my next desperate attempt to rid myself of its curse. Days passed in a surreal blur, each one indistinguishable from the next, marked only by my deteriorating mental state and the slow degradation of the boundaries I had so painstakingly erected. I could feel the protective symbols etched into the walls beginning to fade, as if the darkness itself was erasing them, reclaiming the territory I had temporarily snatched away. Driven to the brink, I decided to seek external help. I contacted an acquaintance, a self-proclaimed expert in paranormal phenomena, who agreed to visit under the guise of curiosity. When he arrived, the weight of his gaze was palpable, scanning the room with a mix of skepticism and veiled fear. As I led him to the basement, the temperature dropped perceptibly, the air thick with the electric tang of impending doom. As we descended the stairs, his casual demeanor faltered. He stopped, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the circle containing the seething shadows. "You've tampered with something ancient, something deeply malevolent," he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the low growl that seemed to emanate from the book itself. I explained the rituals, my voice hoarse with desperation, showing him the book and the pages that had dictated my actions. His eyes widened with each detail, a growing realization of the gravity of my situation dawning on him. "This isn't just about containment," he said, his voice urgent. "You've anchored them to this place, to you. They won't stop until they've consumed everything." The shadows, as if sensing their discussion, intensified their writhing, the circle glowing ominously. My friend hastily began drawing new symbols around the existing circle, chanting under his breath. The atmosphere crackled, a visible battle of wills unfolding before our eyes. He instructed me to repeat the chants, our voices merging in a desperate plea for reprieve. For a moment, it seemed as though we might prevail. The light within the circle brightened, the shadows recoiling. But then, with a sound like cracking thunder, the circle shattered. The darkness surged forth, a wave of unbridled malevolence that threw us back. My friend screamed, a sound cut tragically short as the shadows enveloped him, dragging him into their abyss before I could react. I was left alone, the silence returning, heavier now with the weight of my failed attempt and the loss of my only ally. The book lay open, its pages mocking me, the whispering voices louder than ever. They filled the house, a constant reminder of the depth of my folly and the price of my hubris. In the wake of the disaster, the boundaries between my world and that of the shadows began to blur. I would see flickers of movement in the corner of my eye, hear whispers just behind my shoulder. Sleep became an impossible luxury, each attempt plagued by nightmares of being dragged into the darkness, of endless voids and the echoing laughter of the book. I knew then that I had to confront the source of my torment directly. The book had answers, but it also held the key to my damnation. As I sat down before it once more, a plan began to form, a final ritual, one that would either free me from the shadow's grasp or bind me to them forever. Gathering what little strength and resolve I had left, I prepared for the final confrontation, unaware that the true nature of the book was yet to reveal itself, and with it the darkest secrets of the shadows that sought to claim me. The weight of impending doom hung over me as I prepared for what I knew could be my final act. The shadows had grown bolder, more aggressive, their forms now clearly visible as they prowled the edges of my increasingly fragile sanctum. The book, my tormentor and only guide, lay open on the table, its pages seemingly eager for the climax of our grim saga. I had pieced together a new ritual from snippets of various incantations within the book, each chosen for their potency and the promise of ultimate severance from the supernatural forces I had unwittingly bound to my world. This was to be my final gamble, staking my very soul against the darkness that threatened to consume it. Armed with a concoction of sacred relics and forbidden substances, I began the painstaking process of drawing a new circle, this one far more complex and encompassing the entirety of my basement. Inside this circle, I placed every symbol of protection I knew, each a testament to human resilience against the unknown. As night deepened, the atmosphere tightened like a noose. The air was thick with the electric buzz of unseen forces converging on my home. I could feel the eyes of countless malevolent entities upon me, their gaze piercing through the veil of reality. With the circle complete, I stood at its center, the book in hand, and began to chant. The words were a mix of ancient tongues, their syllables heavy with power and danger. As I spoke, the air around me shimmered, reality bending under the strain of the ritual. The shadows hesitated at the edge of the circle, their forms flickering between this world and some unholy other. They seethed and roared, a cacophony of rage that shook the foundations of the house. But the circle held, a barrier forged of desperation and arcane knowledge. Midway through the incantation, the book itself began to react. It vibrated intensely, its cover buckling as if containing a force desperate to escape. I continued, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around me. The final words of the ritual were a plea, a command for release, shouted over the din of the shadow's fury. As the last syllable echoed through the tumult, a blinding light erupted from the book. It engulfed the room, purifying and burning. The shadows recoiled with unearthly screams, their forms dissolving as the light washed over them. The brightness was overwhelming, a searing column of celestial fire that seemed to cleanse everything it touched. When the light finally receded, the silence that followed was profound. The basement lay in ruins, the remnants of my protective circle scorched into the floor. The book lay at my feet, its cover charred, its pages now blank. Whatever powers it had once held were now extinguished. Exhausted beyond measure, I collapsed, the adrenaline that had sustained me through the ritual ebbing away. I slept there, amidst the wreckage of my last stand, dreams free of darkness for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Upon waking, the world seemed different, lighter somehow, as if a veil had been lifted. My home was quiet, the oppressive weight of the shadows gone. Tentatively, I tested the bounds of my reclaimed life, finding no trace of the malevolent forces that had plagued me. In the aftermath, I buried the remains of the book in a place where no one would find it, deep within the earth, encased in a box lined with sigils of containment. The scars it left upon my life were deep, a constant reminder of the price of delving too far into the unknown. I had survived, but not unscathed. My tale, a stark warning to those who would follow in my footsteps, remains a testament to the thin and treacherous line between curiosity and recklessness. As for the shadows, their absence is a relief, yet I find myself occasionally glancing over my shoulder, a habit born of hard-learned caution, wondering if the darkness will ever truly relinquish its claim on me.